Hi, I'm Gary White for Channel 6, Central Kentucky Television, and I'm here with Dr. Trish Ciccone at Central Kentucky Optometric Associates, with offices in both Lebanon and Springfield. And today we're here for our eye care news, and today we're going to talk about what is commonly referred to as floaters. Tell us, what are they and what causes them?
Well, a floater is anything that's kind of floating or suspended in one of the fluid chambers of your eye that creates a shadow and the shadow kind of obscures your vision. So that's kind of a more specific definition of them. But floaters can be very benign in nature, or they can be very ominous in nature. Okay. We all tend to get floaters sooner or later in our lifetime. The more common type of floater comes from what we call a vitreous detachment or separation. And it's just a normal aging change that occurs in our eye. Vitreous is the jello or the jelly substance in the back of our eye. And when we're born, it's kind of like a jello jiggler. It's clear and it's kind of solid. But as we age, it tends to kind of melt on itself, and it gets more viscous and starts sloshing around in the back of the eye. Mm-hmm. It's held up against the retina by a thin layer of interstitial tissue. Kind of think of it like Elmer's glue. Mm-hmm. And as we get old and it starts sloshing around and that glue gets a little older and a little brittle and the junctions kind of break down, the vitreous can pull away, and it can pull some of that tissue away from the back of the eye. And that generally is what causes most people's floaters. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when the vitreous is kind of collapsing on itself and pulling away from the back of the eye, it uses too much force. It can pull hard enough to make a blood vessel break, and you can have bleeding in the eye, and that can cause some floaters, some red blood cells and little clumps of blood floating in the back of your eye. Or it can pull even hard enough to pull a tear or a hole in your retina. You can have some pigment that gets released, and that can again cause another type of floater. So floaters themselves in most situations are quite benign, but in some situations can be very ominous. So if you have a floater that occurs and you haven't noticed that floater before, so it's a new floater, or a floater that may or may not be associated with any colors, like sometimes people will say it looked red or it looked really black. That sometimes is a sign of bleeding. Or if you have flashing lights in your vision along with the onset of a new floater, kind of like little lightning bolts or flashing lights, but people kind of describe those differently as well. Those can be more ominous. Anytime you see a floater that you haven't seen before or haven't noticed before, it's time to come on in pretty fast and let us get a look to make sure that you haven't had a bleed and don't have a hole or a tear in your retina. A vitreous detachment or separation that is accompanied either by the release of pigment or the release associated with a hemorrhage has an 85% chance or higher of having a tear associated with it. And so that's a pretty staggering statistic right there.
Wow. And is there treatment if you get a floater, or what's
we don't necessarily treat the floaters in most cases. But if there's a hole or a tear in the retina, that will usually get treated to try and prevent a retinal detachment. Mm-hmm.
And so it is something that potentially can be rectified.
Yeah, if we catch those holes and tears early before they lead to a detachment, then they generally don't cause much problem down the road. But if you don't catch them, or you can get the floater and not get a tear or a hole or a detachment till a couple months after that the floater formed too. So the timing, if you come in with a floater and it's a new floater, we're going to watch you for a while to make sure that you don't develop a hole or a tear or a detachment down the road. Sometimes it all happens right at once. But other times it can occur kind of sequentially over time.
And so if you see any of them, the best thing is to come to Central Kentucky Optometric Associates, again with offices in Lebanon and Springfield, be checked out and determine whether it's something that needs to be continued observation.
Yeah, the staff is trained to kind of triage, and flashes and floaters are usually getting that day kind of a thing. You know, that's what's going to happen is we're going to look at you first. And then if we need the retina specialist, then we'll send you on in those cases where we feel like you need to have some prophylactic treatment or repair work done.
Right. Is there anything besides age that is a contributing factor to getting
You know,
floaters?
I would say genetics is probably in there. More high myopia, the more nearsighted you are, the more prone you are to developing them. So age, genetics, high myopia, trauma could cause the onset of a floater. If you had head or eye trauma, it doesn't necessarily have to be directly to the eye, but if you take a good, you know, jolt and, you know, a good shearing force back and forth could certainly do it. So, yeah, so all those things.
Can contribute.
Sure.
So contact Central Kentucky Optometric Associates if you see any floaters that arise in your eyes. And again, they have offices Lebanon and Springfield. And what's the phone number to give a call to set up an appointment?
Lebanon is 270-692-1871. And you can also text message us now. We have a new and up and running text messaging system where it will flash up. And when you text message us, it'll flash up through our Solution Reach program. And the girls, it'll show up on their computer screen. And Springfield is 859-336-9388. And they have the same system there as well, the Solution Reach. So
Great.
you can text message us or you can call us.
Fantastic. And that's Central Kentucky Optometric Associates in Lebanon and Springfield. And here with Dr. Trish Ciccone. And this is Gary White, Channel 6, Central Kentucky Television.